That is James Mennie. He's going to take a look at a couple of stories for you today. Jim, how we doing?
Hey, we're $10 billion to the good. I'm feeling all right.
Let's go ahead and break that down for people. This is just happening, and I think they're still up there at the microphone right now. So Mark Carney in Longueuil today, along with Christine Frechette. So bottom line, what's happening here?
$10 billion over 10 years to Quebec, which and all the observers admit this is way more money than Quebec sort of deserves demographically. But hey, politics are politics, and the opposition are already screaming bloody murder. This is all time for the election, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is the money from Ottawa is targeting stuff that actually real taxpayers, real voters do pay attention to, whether it's maintaining or renovating CJAD universities, renovating hospitals. And I got to tell you, it's not the usual suspects, my friend. It's Hotel Dieu in Lévis, Maisonneuve-Rosemont, of course, Jonquière, Chicoutimi, Outaouais, and the renowned Charles-Lavoie Hospital in Longueuil. Listen, these are all regional hospitals. These are all francophone hospitals. The message is super duper clear. $1 billion as well for public transit, which is like just on its last legs. In other words, things that people actually care about, Aaron, things that people actually worry about, actually need to use on a daily basis are being funded by the great shaitan, Mark Carney's Liberals. Will they be able to get away with this? I'm waiting for the PQ to hold a press conference and say this is just cynical, politicking. They're buying Quebecers, votes with their own money. And Quebecers will go, yeah, okay, because you know what? This is stuff that we need. But this is a real monkey wrench thrown into the electoral plans of the Parti Québécois and indeed the Quebec Liberals, because let's face it, it wasn't Jean Milliard who was standing alongside Mark Carney. It was Christine Frechette. Right. And who knows where this might lead. If Madame Frechette is getting results from Ottawa, and they are making it clear that the whole issue, or the whole argument of 50+1 being a successful referendum vote becomes more and more theoretical, as everyone realizes the last thing you want to do is is wave a fond farewell to that $10 billion if you have your own little nation. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this works. And indeed, I'm waiting for somebody somewhere. And indeed, it'll probably be perhaps even within the CAC, but certainly in the PQ, say, you know what, I'm sure there's going to be strings attached to this, federalism, blah, blah, blah. Quebec has the right to spend its money any way it sees fit. Some way to throw les bâtons dans les roues for this deal, but I don't think it's going to work. I think a lot of people are going to look at this story and go, holy crow, what took you so long? And I'm glad, this is honest to God good news for Quebec taxpayers.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, if you're the PQ and you complain about the fact you're not getting enough money from the feds, they just handed you a check for $10 billion. Yeah. It's hard to sort of look at that and go, well, you know what, it's not good enough.
Well, the thing is, and maybe Prime Minister Frechette will draw a lesson from this because the PQ, for much of its existence, has been nothing more than a party of grievance. We don't get this, we don't get that. Right. We'd be much better being on. Well, here we got 10 billion reasons that are saying, maybe it might be a good idea to hang around in this federation. That used to be the talk out of the CAC. Are we going to hear less of that? Are we going to perhaps see a philosophical shift within the CAC? Who knows? But right now, it's going to be interesting to see whether, how sincerely Charles Milliard of the Liberals, Quebec Liberals, is going to hop up and down saying this is just electoralism. It's been crazy. Yesterday I came back after a leave and I said the one thing that struck me was how much taxpayers' time is being wasted having ridiculous conversations about ridiculous topics. And here you and I are talking about $10 billion for actual tangible issues that need to be solved. And I'll bet you right now there are speechwriters for all the parties in the National Assembly that are tearing their hair out because they're not really that attuned to working within the real world. So this is going to be, I think the next 24 hours are going to be very interesting to see how this $10 billion head-on collision with Quebec and certainly the Parti Québécois plays out.
You have a note saying cities may be crumbling, but the CAQ is ensuring they'll crumble in regulated French. What's this about?
So did you not see that?
No.
If it turns out that TVA, God love them, their bureau d'enquête found out that basically Jean-François Roberge has put municipalities on notice.
Oh, yeah.
That everything, Everything will be done in French, my friend. You want to go buy a plumber's helper, my friend? You go out to and you better make damn sure that hardware store is on our approved list of France, the OQLF's approved list of Bill 101 adhering businesses. And of course, the municipalities, which are basically hanging on by their fingernails, are just saying, this is absolutely crazy. This is going completely over the top. But what I love about this story, Aaron, is that you even have the Parti Québécois joining with the Liberals saying this is an aberration, this is nuts. I mean, the municipalities have enough on their plate. Last week, here we have Jean-François Roberge, the Minister of Quebec Identity, the big instigator of existential crises in Quebec, turning around and accusing the Parti Québécois of going over the top. Because why? Because they wanted to ban the wearing of religious symbols by kids in elementary school. You see, and here we have Robert saying, no, attends a minute, this is like secularism, radical secularism, and this is going too far. So all of a sudden, the conversation, which at one point seemed to be rather tuned with each of the parties trying to outdo each other in scaring Quebec voters about how their identity and language are threatened. Now, all of a sudden, there seems to be a decision to hit the brakes and go, no, that's too far. Nobody expected things to go that far when, in fact, the law very likely would allow it to go that far. So, and once again, another interesting situation to watch as we get closer to Election Day. As I say, I think a lot of the talking points, a lot of the very dog-eared scripts that have been used by each of the parties in the National Assembly are to be dropped in the shredder, and someone's going to have to sit down and start doing some new typing very fast.
By the way, to your point, so the story you just outlined here, for people who did not hear, and I just want to go back because you're right, it goes from whatever you want to buy now as a municipal employee. It used to be a $5,000 limit, right? Now that's gone. So to your point, if you want to buy a plunger, a club sandwich, if you want to go to a gas station and fill up, and somehow not everything is in compliance with the language of the French or the chart of the French language, you're going to get basically in trouble. You can't do business with that person.
Yeah, the headline summed it up very well. The headline of the story that broke this is basically not even a siphon. In other words, you know what? When you go out and those little kind of bozo Joe job errands that a lot of municipalities have to do, like if there's a backed up toilet, the plunger's shot, go buy a new one. You're going to start looking around as the water's flowing for the 101 compliant hardware store.
That's insane.
Welcome to the CAF Quebec, my friend.
Yeah. By the way,
on for 8 years.
It also says in the event that this this happens, you find someone who's non-compliant. The directive provides that a list of non-compliant companies would be published on a monthly basis.
Sure.
I mean,
exactly. That's how Aaron. You don't understand. That's how you protect the language.
Of course, it is. Yeah.
And identity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
By pointing out the hardware stores that are selling plungers that may have bilingual labels on them.
Yeah. What could be worse? Yeah. Okay. Beyond that, Jim, what else you want to talk about today?
Well, I find it fascinating that the tone of the usual conversation, the usual hysteria, and the usual we're all being threatened. It seems to be changing. I think certainly in Quebec, in the National Assembly, they're realizing we're getting closer to Election Day, and we're going to have to scrape a lot of the BS off of our usual daily routines because people are not going to buy into it. But what's really fascinating, and I just saw this on Passon, the Bloc Québécois, which is getting ignored these days because they're just being bulldozed in the polls by the Carney Liberals, has tried to shame everyone in the House of Commons into saying where they stand on the Clarity Act. They feel that, once again, it's only Quebecers. It's only the right of Quebecers, Aaron, to decide this. Although what I find interesting is there are some other questions that get, tacitly posed by that point of view, i.e., who's a Quebecer? We've always had this conversation, but really, who actually is a Quebecer? And if Quebec, right now, Quebec is a part of Canada, that may cause Monsieur Blanchette, François Blanchette, to have an allergic reaction, but the fact is, it's a part of Quebec. Why wouldn't Canada have something to say in terms of the process that would see Quebec leave the Canadian Federation? So obviously, I mean, they're swinging for the fences, and they realize that distant train whistle that they're hearing is the Oblivion Express coming to get them. And, down the road, we'll probably see even more crazy suggestions from the Bloc Québécois. But in the meantime, I think a lot of people in that so-called federal party and a lot of people in so-called nationalist or separatist parties are also sweating bullets, because the closer you get to voting day, the more you have to ante up. And the fact is, when all you have is a lot of scare tactics, a lot of completely fictional crises that you've been hiding behind for 8 years, all of a sudden, that cold air starts to feel really, really scary.
Hey, Jim, I just want to ask you, with respect to the issue yesterday, Christine Frechette speaking before the Chamber of Commerce, and we spoke about it. Has there been much fallout today? French media pick up anything on this, or is it a non-story for them?
No. They all yesterday focused on her very tentative answer, and perhaps we know why she's being tentative, as to what the CAQ government's infrastructure plan would be for municipalities. And perhaps she knew, well, give me a day and I'll have $10 billion to cover some of my ideas. But that was as far as it went. No, of course not. You're not. It's simply that disconnect is permanent. It's there. There's no point in getting miffed about it, because it is simply not going to change. But all that said, will anybody dare race it in this campaign?
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Last thing I want to bring up, if you happen to hear Jean-François Lisée earlier today? No?
No, I'm afraid not.
So I have him on talking about his brand new book about René Lévesque and Pierre-Elliott Trudeau. This is the second book actually he's written. And at the end of the interview, because we talked about the book and everything else, I just wanted him to weigh in on Quebec politics, right? We used to have him on as an analyst from time to time. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, do I have the question, Brian, or just his answer? So I asked him basically to kind of assess how things are going right now. I want you to hear what he said. This is his sort of take on what he sees coming.
The worst thing that could happen to Charles Millard, who's a very competent guy, is a woman clone of him coming into the scene. I mean, he would have been much better with Bernard Drinville to differentiate, but now it's very tough to differentiate between Charles Millard and Christine Frechette, and she's more attuned to the soft nationalist than Charles Millard can ever be.
What do you think of that?
Well, Christine Frechette used to work for Jean-François Lisée. She was part of his staff. But all that said, I like Monsieur Lisée, if only because he and his then fellow cabinet minister Bernard Drinville, as Péquiste, wrote a letter, I think, to the New York Times comparing themselves to Thomas Jefferson and Sam Adams. And I will always, talk. Okay. I always doff my hat to both those guys just for the cheekiness. But I find it interesting that he's kind of, giving the back of his hand to Madame Frechette. But I mean, maybe that's just my impression.
Well, my take is he's kind of saying if Charles Millard, I think he used the word clone, right? That he's basically a clone of her. But I think that's him saying he would have had a way to differentiate himself. Speaking of Charles Millard, had it been he was running against Drinville and not Christine Frechette, who's too much kind of like he is.
Wow, yeah, and you know what? He may be right, but that's the problem with Charles Millard as well. Yeah. And I think a lot of our listeners will concur with that diagnosis. Yeah. Is that we already have a Christine Frechette. We thought you were going to be somebody else, but if you're going to turn around and try and match her with every sort of wishy-washy position on nationalism or identity, guess what? You may wind up on the fast track to being leader of the second opposition party. In the National Assembly, as opposed to the official opposition.
I think that's
party.
Exactly what he's saying. James Mennie, Jim, thank you.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers. Powered by North by Northeast Music Festival. Taking place June 10th to 14th across Toronto. iHeart New Music. Stream now, online, on your smart speaker, and preset on the free iHeartRadio app.